This is the thing that everyone understands. What he probably doesn't, she probably doesn't, may or may not know, likely doesn't, is like how marketing directly contributes to revenue.
How do we show up in the places that our customers exist, make them like us, and then get them to do something?
I'm Margaret Kelsey.
And I'm Devin Bramhall.
And this is Don't Say Content,
a show created in partnership with Share Your Genius.
We were going to talk about control and creativity, especially in regards to leading a team and when to let go of creative control, when to focus creative control.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's a good one. I feel like this topic is at every phase of my career, I've needed to work on this and I've never perfected it.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if this is just me, but like everyone around me lately is like doing that in their own lives where they're like, everything is horrible. And even though I have complete control over most of it, I feel helpless and I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know why. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like I have more agency than I've ever had in my life. And even though I'm still deeply unhappy, I'm like at least going in the right direction. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like I feel fine.
Yeah. I was trying to find like a funny way to like be like a Devin Renaissance.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I was going to try to merge it together, but it doesn't really merge together.
But it will.
Renaissance.
If you know what, talking to Anne really made me feel better about myself because she's in the middle of writing right now too. And her manner was just a little bit different. It was so subtle. And we got to talking about book writing and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, like I felt a kinship. Like it's not just me. Like this is my first time. So I don't know what I don't know. And
yeah,
I was like, so it's normal to be cranky? And she was like, yes.
I feel like writing for me is the same way I feel about fishing, which is like, I don't like the act, but I like the result. Like I don't like to fish, but I love catching a fish, you know, but you have to like really wait and struggle and not catch a fish to catch a fish. And I don't like that part. And writing is the same way. To have written is wonderful. To write is so awful.
You want to know what's crazy? I'm constantly finding new ways that we complement each other because aside from writing a book, I love the act of writing, which is part of the problem because I just had this situation with my client where we were working on some LinkedIn posts for her. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to hire her someone to do some ghostwriting for her just to increase in volume. She's a superb writer, which is part of the problem. And so we brought on a friend of mine and we were like figuring out, we were going over the project post, me and Allison. I told her, I was like, you and I don't deserve each other because I'm going to get as persnickety as you, which is also why you trust me. And when I make edits, you usually go with most of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, so therefore, we are not allowed to collaborate on your lead.
We need a counterbalance, right?
Right. I do think that that's relevant for this discussion because I think when you look at it as giving up creative control, it feels very like, right? But when you think about it as a means to solving a problem or a means to an outcome, you're like, well, if it leads to fish,
yeah,
or me having caught a fish,
yeah,
but it's not, it's less painful, it's faster, I get to spend more time in the I've caught a fish phase.
Yeah.
Then you start to look at it and you're like, oh, maybe this writing is fine. Maybe.
You're trying to talk me into it. I'm trying to think of the metaphor that I would say, which is like giving up creative control would be letting someone bait the hook.
Yeah.
Or like do the bits of it that you don't like, that you're not good at. But I think this is another piece of it, right? We're talking about creative control, and that can be all sorts of things. That can be words, that can be design and images and stuff. And I think it's really interesting that once you get up to, and I'm sure that there's the unicorns out there that were a brand designer that rose to CMO, right? I'm sure that those people exist. But a lot of times it's usually when you're leading a team at some certain level in your career, you have these disparate skill sets underneath you that you can't go around and push the pixels, right? I feel like that's where I'm at, which is especially when it comes to visual design, like visual creative. I have to give up that control because I'm not going to go in there and push pixels, like I can't make the images. And thankfully I have an incredible designer that like has absolutely changed our look and feel at the job I'm at right now. She was an intern of mine at OpenView. And then she went to
Oh.
another company, and then I was able to hire her on at Coderis, which was awesome. But like that's one place too where I'm like, oh, if I feel comfortable with it there, where I'm like, yeah, like, what do you think we should do? I can help mold it based on what I understand about like the internal values and stuff like that. But ultimately, like, you're going to be setting the direction for the visual brand and design. Then why couldn't I do that with the other stuff that I feel more comfortable with, like in terms of writing and whatever? Yeah.
It's because if you have done something a way before, your like brain automatically decides that it's right. Sorry,
Yeah.
mine does.
Yeah.
Mine's like, girl, you crushed it. Like that's constant.
This is the only way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so what I think happens is if you are familiar with the road ahead, where the turns are, where the stop signs, you're going to be more opinionated about how to drive it.
Yeah.
Whereas like with design, I'm same as you. I appreciate the visuals. I'm a very visual person, but I just don't know how to make them.
Yeah.
And so working with a designer has always felt like an unlock to me. I'm like, oh, you're bringing things to life that I never could.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think you need to get to a place with the things you already know. Like just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's best.
Mhm.
And I think those are the times, oddly, where I lean on data the most because it helps me get out of my own way. Like there's a weekly email that my client sends out right now. And I came in and looked at everything and they have new goals. So I'm evaluating the emails and deciding like what to do next to oversimplify this.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I looked at, I was like, this design is like old, like it's not modern.
Yeah.
So my first thought in my mind is like, okay, we've got to change the design. But then I'm like, do we? And so I looked at the email performance, and they've been sending this email for years, and they get like a 60% open rate. And there's a lot to click on in there. It's like a resource roundup. So that's just like, it's sending people off site. Like there's no real like marketing purpose to it. I think it's like an average 9% click rate. Makes sense. Tons of links, super relevant. But I was like, so when I was going over the revamp plan yesterday with them, I was like, look, we're not going to change much.
Yeah.
Like I am going to change the design a little bit because I want to bring it up a tad. But I was like, other than that, I'm going to experiment with net new content. I'm not going to overhaul this. It makes no sense. It's working.
Yeah.
Whether I like it or not, whether I like the way it looks or not, it's working. And I think that's one way that like if my persnickety, high maintenance, whatever self is trying to interject, the data helps pull me out. It's like,
yeah. And also there is something about consistency that people really like. And so it's so often that every time I see a company do a new like logo redesign as part of their brand redesign, I'm like, you just threw in the trash all of that work that you did of associating that logo with this company and that brand and that trust. Like every single time I'm like, I know it was fun and I know it was cool and I know it itched your brain, but like, do you know what you just did?
yes. And there's been like funny consumer examples of like backlash when like the Tropicana one from years ago, and I'm sure there's more modern ones, but
Oh,
yeah,
and just
you're
like
right.
everything, it always ends up looking sort of phallic, right? Like Airbnb's redesign came out and everyone's like, oh no. I don't know what the woman's
B2B,
version of does phallic cover both? No, phallic is just for phallus, like a male
yeah.
thing, but you know what I mean? Like it always looks like a body part.
Oh yeah. Like I think B2B specifically is especially guilty of like those B2B founders should not be allowed to name anything, including their company, choose a visual of any kind. Like they're just so bad at it. It's like
I have a tangential hysterical story about
me.
logo design, and it's not inappropriate, unfortunately. But
Yeah. I'm like, come on.
When I started just fractional at the company that I went in-house to, Coderis, we were branding their customer community. And so I actually was working with the designer that then we brought in full-time in also a fractional sense. So we were doing this logo for the customer community that was kind of like a reimagination of our core logo to show the consistency, but also that it's new and whatever. And the way that the little arrow chevrons were placed, the middle of it looked like a flower. And it was so funny because all of us women saw it and we were like, oh, I wonder if a man would want this on. Would they feel comfortable wearing it like on a shirt or whatever because it looks like a flower? None of the men saw a flower. And so it was one of these hysterical things where I was like, oh, I'm trying to solve for a problem that like the man will never even see that it looks like a flower because their brain isn't seeing, you know what I mean? It was so funny, but every woman was like, yeah, it definitely looks like a flower. I wonder if that would work. You know,
Like
I wonder
the
if that
dress moment. Like, is it blue and black or is it gold and white?
Yeah, well, and it was even like when we did it in the tonal kind of like black white thing, like we all just saw a flower in the middle the way that the shape was, but men didn't. So,
but see, that's the exact point, because the finer your taste becomes, right? You do the same thing over and over and over again. You get better at it, and you get better at seeing what best is. And you're increasingly the worst person to represent the masses.
Yeah.
You know, it's why people who work in fashion, like they all wear black because they're like, if you look closely, they're paying attention to like the lines, the stitching of the lines or the fabric, whatever. They see nuance in their outfits. And a layperson is like, you're just wearing all black, right? And that's us. Like, we're wearing all black and being like, doesn't everybody see the magnificence of what I have done here?
Yeah.
And they're like,
no, it looks
I
like
don't
you're
see a
just
flower.
black.
What flower? And that's why I think you're deputizing then. You're deputizing to another person. And to do that effectively, I think you need to be open-minded.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a good example. This is great. When I was at Help Scout, we hired a person to manage our social media. And this was back in 2016 through 2018. So we were posting all the time from the brand. People followed the brand. It was like a big deal. And the founders had very strong opinions about the brand, the personality, the look, the feel, everything, which was part of what made it such an exciting place to work, but also made it absolutely terrifying 100% of the time. And you can see how social is the first thing that like manifests for people and where they get the most itchy. And so I brought on Cecilia, who, God bless, was so like brave. And so she started doing things that even made me uncomfortable. I was like, you're using GIFs?
Yeah, there's no brand consistency in GIFs. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I was like, I only use Help Scout illustrations.
Yeah.
Like, I was even a snob. And she's like, girl, it working. Like, look it over. And she was right.
Yeah.
She was right. And what she was right about was not just, oh, people are engaging. She was right in the type of community feel we were trying to embody and bring close to us. We were a human customer service brand. One time I sent a newsletter on Thanksgiving that literally just like said thank you and celebrated customer service folks. We wrote this really nice note to them. No CTA. So she got that and took it a step further and kept deepening it. Oh, wait, if I hadn't been able to step out of myself and see, wait, this is doing exactly what I'm trying to do more of. It just looks different.
Yeah.
I could have squashed something that
actually was really, that would really work. Yeah, that's a great example of creative control, of saying, all right, maybe I don't know everything.
Which, like, once you get over that hump, you're like, wait, this is great.
Then you're like, wait, I know nothing.
Like, for so much of my career, I was like, I wanted to be the one that knew everything because I thought that would make me valuable. Now it's the opposite. I'm like, I don't know. I say that all the time. And if it's something I don't want to be good at, I don't help. Like, I don't try to figure it out. I'm like, this is beyond me. I actually can't even think about doing this. Then, like, if it's something I do want to do, then I'll invest a little bit in finding someone else to do it and maybe work more closely with them on it or something. But like, I'm always trying to pass off the work now.
Devin,
Yeah.
how difficult is it to create content when you're also leading an entire dang company?
It's really hard. You're not wanting the ideas for the content itself.
Yeah.
Because when I was running the agency, the mission and vision and values that I had set were like the passion inside me and why we were existing. And so I was constantly having these ideas that I would share with the team to get them motivated. When I left Animals, I didn't have time to create content. So now that I'm a solopreneur too, who's like, okay, I'm writing a book, I'm doing more than consulting now. I'm building some things and need to be out there among my people because everything I'm building is for them.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And so having the ability to record something and have that be immediately translatable into multiple different types of content is literally how I get by. Quite literally, the strategy in my book. I'm like, the human-centered multimedia AI-powered approach to content marketing. This is literally it because it's been my experience. It's like you need the media first to create that water of content flowing down river that AI can help you atomize, right? You're just using your own words.
And the good news is Share Your Genius has something called Content Catalyst that does exactly that. They take all the good stuff from your execs in a 90-minute session, and then they deliver to you video clips, social posts, full-on articles, and it's all mapped to your strategy, which is the most important thing about content creation, is that it actually does something for you.
And you know what's brilliant about that? Ever since I've been a marketer, I've gone to a new company and they've been like, should we start a podcast? And I've always been like, no, whatever they want to do with media at first, unless it's part of my broader strategy, I'm like, no. Well, guess what? Now you can say yes to that, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a video series, whatever it is, because now you can make the case for doing more with that because they literally hand it to you.
It's like content facilitation instead of content creation. And I think the best part is you're not running around after your executives or your thought leaders about deadlines, about them actually creating it and getting it out the door, which is always the issue is, do they actually have time to do the darn thing? So all you need is 90 minutes for them to sit on a call, and then Share Your Genius does the damn thing and actually gives you all the content, and you don't have to wait and have that bottleneck be your executives.
It works because it's working for me right now. I am the queen of like, no, I hate that. I'm the worst. Like, I am my own worst enemy. But when I see my words reflected back to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I do believe that.
Man, you make me look good.
AMPS, they've been incubating this for a while, and we know because we're insiders. Both Katie and Rachel have presented iterations to us along the way and gotten our feedback. They built something that we believe in because we've seen it, and now we get it.
If you're interested in having Share Your Genius do this Content Catalyst program for you, there's obviously a link in our show notes. You can reach out to them. Let them know your good friends Margaret and Devin sent you.
Instead of it being a big investment, instead of you thinking about, oh, I have to hire an agency or I have to hire a person, like this is efficient. This is efficient use of money because you're getting a lot for what you're ordering and you don't have to get it from lots of different places. And the cost savings is huge.
And sanity savings. Can't put a price on that.
No way. No way.
I've said for the last couple of years, like, I want to matter less. And I think this is how I've been talking about like management and leadership lately, is that the way to do that effectively, to matter less, but still have the team make good decisions, is not to always tell them what to do in the individual moment, but instead let them peek inside of your brain of how you would make that decision. Like, do you have different data points? Because sometimes we make decisions because we make the best decision, and we don't have access to data points that would have changed our decision if we had access to them. And I think that delivery of like, okay, first of all, why did you make that decision? Like, especially in like a creative place, how did you go about making that decision? And if you would have made a different decision, right? Like let's go back to your GIF or no GIF one. If you were like, oh, I have a data point of the fact that, I don't know, we can get sued if we use GIFs or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You would be like, well, I would make a different decision because I have access to this other data point, right? And so I try to use that too, of like, if I would make a different decision from what my team's making, it's like, oh, well, I would make it because of these 3 data points that would put me in this direction. If I had this data point, it might put me in this direction. But letting them understand how you make decisions and how you would make decisions then gives them the ability to make even better decisions because they're doing the work and they have more data points than you probably do, right?
Right.
But
You're
I do think that
enabling them,
that's,
not bossing them, right? You're giving them like a mindset that they can mold however they want, right? I think that's kind of what you're saying.
And you were saying that like, okay, the social media brand voice is like, we want to be human, we want to be warm, approachable, blah blah blah. And she was like, yeah, and I see that this new thing is actually a way to do that. And so you're like,
Exactly.
yeah, I actually would make the same, oh yeah, I would make a different decision based on the fact that now I can see that this is the way that the world is moving towards, and this is how people are like to communicate and like to go back and forth on social media. And so I
Yeah.
think about that all the time, where it's like, I don't need to be the person that's always red light, green lighting things, because I don't want to be that person. That stresses me out if I just need to be needed all the time. Here's how I would make the decision. Sometimes it takes a little while to like indoctrinate someone into how you would make a decision so that they can make one appropriately, but then it's let them fly,
Yeah, I'm with you 1,000%. I think this like kind of harkens back to the influence versus fame, where I want to be influential, which means I'm not always going to be in the spotlight. And that was very much with animals. I told you when I left animals, I didn't know anyone knew who I was
Mm-hmm.
because my thing, and I really learned this from Sunit. Sunit Bot was everyone knows if they listen to this podcast, actually. He was my boss at Help Scout. And he was the one that really taught me this, like talking about how you make decisions and principles of how he leads, which he passed on to me. He's like, you are a hero if you're elevating others around you, right? Like that is how, and I've always done that. So what you're talking about of like not being the point, the focus, but being the enabler, that to me is like, yeah, that's the embodiment of influence. And I think what you're talking about makes me think you end up focusing more on providing context,
Mm-hmm.
like what you're talking about, whether it's how you make decisions or opening up the curtain a little bit more to give them that next layer of why. So they're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And then for me, the real unlock was realizing that my most important job is to define the question I'm trying to answer or the outcome I'm after as specifically and clearly and without jargon
Yeah.
as possible, right? Because that was the thing. If you can help someone understand what you're after, then you shouldn't have to go in and be like, here's how to do it.
Yeah.
It should be self-evident. It's like, when you're talking about like marketing strategy, right? Okay, well, once you decide who your customer is, you'll know automatically what channels they're on. And therefore, you'll know which ones to pick and you'll know the type of things to say, where the holes are, whatever. All these decisions get made for you. It's easy.
Yeah.
So you just have to get through that first hard part. And what I realized, this was my experience, particularly in the startup space, is in absence of corporate business training, I think they were mistaking all that micromanagement, like how and when and using what, as clearly defining the project, when the thing that was never clear was like, why the fuck are we doing this?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's why I think we've gotten so far into the whole, like, the over glorification of channels being like an end all be all, because we've missed the bigger question of like, why are we doing this? And those are really important things to define. I always think there's always like one step above that you're like, oh, I never even said this is the thing. And we walk through conversations and personal life and professional life where we think that we're aligned here, so it goes without saying. And then we start talking, not realizing that we haven't like done like a, okay, let me say the stupid thing that I think we both agree on, because half of the time you're not even there, you know?
Yes.
And then you're having conversations completely like not talking about the same thing because you didn't go and have the bravery to be like, I know that we both know that we're starting here, right? Okay, now let's start the conversation. We'll just like start the conversation and completely miss each other because we're like, oh, we don't need to say that, right? Like we don't need to say the fact that the real reason we're doing marketing is to make sure that people know us, like us, and we can get them to do what we want them to do, right? That would be stupid to say that. But it's like, then we're like, you know, all in like, well, you have to have Twitter or else you're never going to have a brand, or you have to have YouTube or whatever.
Well, it depends on your audience too. If you're talking to the product person, you're like, the thing you both agree on is that you're doing this to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the thing that everyone understands. What he probably doesn't, she probably doesn't, what she may or may not know, likely doesn't, is like how marketing directly contributes to revenue.
Yeah.
Because the way the framework in which she's used to operating has a much more direct action impact.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because I can automatically think of times in my past when I was running a project, trying to get executive buy-in, or just like keep them on board. At that time, I think it was really just Sunit that got the buy-in, but I was trying to support it. And I was giving all this detail that I thought showed I knew what the heck I was doing. I was like, look at my Trello board. This is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I remember my CEO one time being like, it is clear this is something you're not good at. I'm going to take this over for you. And I was like, first of all, rude and untrue. But also, I was devastated because I thought I'd done all the work, and I'd just done the wrong work.
Yeah.
The right work would have been in plain English saying, the purpose of this project is to, I was literally doing that this morning with one of the women I work with, my client, and it wasn't even anything that complex. It was, we were trying to work on like a new sales motion for them. And the task we were working on was like the process for getting it activated. And I think initially I had said something like, the purpose of this project is to like manage this aspect of sales to make sure nothing gets dropped. But once we started working on it, I was like, no, that's not it at all. The purpose of this project is to launch our sales motion by Thursday.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that like to get there, the most important thing is to start asking those dumb questions.
Yeah.
Don't you remember when you were coming up, like these brilliant people asked what seemed like very basic questions, but also I couldn't answer them because they were so simple, and that takes, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's it. I'm like, hold on. Like we'll be in a meeting and I'll be like, what does that word mean? How are you interpreting that word?
Yeah.
Those are the types of questions I ask.
It takes a certain level of audacity, self-confidence in your brain. You're like, I am noticing no one is speaking the same language here. So I'm going to say something that probably sounds dumb, but is going to point out the fact that we are absolutely having different conversations. Because then you also have to be willing to risk derailing the meeting, or I don't want to make people feel stupid, but if we're all not actually aligned on what we're actually talking about, or why we're doing something, or why it's important, it's going to be bad.
You know what? You're right. And the thing is, you kind of have to earn the right to ask dumb questions, which is wrong. Like, I think that's bad. But there were times in my career where like, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking of several times that I did, and I was not, I should not have, based on the fact that I did not have the ability yet to derail meetings and ask those questions. And I I won't tell the exact stories, but I have a couple times.
I think there's an interpretation when you're at a certain level that other people have around your abilities, that even if you're really good, even if they think you're like better than everybody at your level, like there's still this unaware assumption around how much knowledge you have. And so if you ask a question that's like simple and straightforward,
Yeah.
they interpret it as you not having the knowledge. That still happens to me today. I don't know if this is like a woman thing, but sometimes I'm like, I'll ask what I think is a question that is complex in my mind, but very simple. And then they like start explaining marketing to me. And I'm like, that's not, I'm like, you know, I do this for a living, right? This is what your profit margin is. I'm like, I think I know what profit margins are. I'm asking you a way more sophisticated question.
My read on that, without being in those exact situations, is that's defensiveness of not being able to answer your actual simple question, right? It's like, oh, she must not know this, and I'll just.
Well, I will not name names, but I do remember a time when I was told that strategy was just doing strategy, and that product marketing was that part of the strategy was doing product marketing and then explaining product marketing to me. It's like, have you heard of product marketing? I'm like, no names, but it was a very defensive conversation. And I was like, you should be speaking at a way higher, more sophisticated level than this.
But strategy is one of those things that I think nobody sits down and says, when we use the word strategy, what are we talking about?
Most of the time it's a plan, by the way. Most of the time what they're talking about.
That's the issue. Yeah. They're like, well, yeah, this plan.
No, a strategy are taking two things that don't go together and figuring out a way to put those two things together in a way that is better than anything you thought was. Like, it's faster. It doesn't just achieve your desired outcome. It's like the existence of those two things together creates a whole new opportunity for you and solves your problem at the same time.
That's a good strategy. Yeah. I think at the most basic level, it's documentation of executive alignment and the things you're going to focus on and not focus on.
Yeah. When they say strategy, what most executives mean is, give me a plan of what you're going to do to get from point A to point B by this date using these constraints that you have and these tools and this budget.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is planning.
But what we're going to focus on, what we're going to not focus on, that documentation is a strategy.
Yeah. Well, kind of. It's more a documentation that supports your strategy, right? Where you're like, you will have already figured out, those are the manifestation of the why. So it's like, if you make the decision of not focusing on this and focusing on this instead, those are the results of the strategy you've chosen that get built into the process. But it's the figuring out of what to include and not include.
Yeah.
This is something that has come out of my working with Jay, was like, you know, when a process just works, like when you just shut up and do other people's processes, it works. This is the perfect example. Everyone I've hired this past year to help me, A, they're all my friends, and B, I'm just like, tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. And it works. These people are really smart. So we're working on the premise, and I forgot the prompt that he gave me, but he was like, oh, I think it was something like, what do you want marketers to stop, or companies to stop doing? Something like that. And I said, they should stop doing marketing. Just stop doing marketing. That's your entire problem, is you keep talking about doing marketing when you should be trying to achieve outcomes.
Yeah.
And I was like, all of a sudden, all this stuff with the book I was trying to tie together, everything else, I was like, because this goes back to, I think we did an episode on it. It's like, marketing is business strategy if you let them do that, right? And so because you have at your fingertips, you are the cross section of product, customer, sales, everything. Like, you're in the middle. And so if you're allowed to leverage all of those things and have some semblance of control, you can come up with a really smart business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And when a company hires a marketer, a lot of times they're like, I need someone to do this kind of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a big company that's established and they already have like their whole journey set up or whatever. But the problem is that journey doesn't always work. And I've seen that happen where like the decisions they made aren't working anymore, or they never worked. It was like the impact of, dev, or what do you call it? Marops being like, we have to do it this way, and sales being like, F you, like, I only want to qualify this type. And so real strategy in that moment is like, how do we get to our objectives anyway? Right? I guess this is the thing I'm going to be telling people for the rest of the year. It's the foundation of all my
As
future
marketers,
talks.
stop doing marketing, do business strategy.
Just companies.
Yeah, companies.
I'm like, everybody, stop doing marketing. Right? Because that gets you to the kernel of the challenge, right?
Yeah.
If you stop thinking about doing marketing or doing sales, and you start to think about it as, I want to make more money. Specifically this year, I want to make this much more money. It's like, okay, now you're starting with a from scratch mindset where you may realize, oh shit, not only our founder is hot shit and everybody with power and money already likes them. And so if they were to launch a newsletter for the first quarter before the product is ready to come out, we can build up like a lot of hype and following and engagement, whatever, so that when the beta's ready, we've got a hot beta list. Like we can really get some awesome people on there, get them excited, use them to promote the product. And then you're like, oh, also people pay for newsletters now. So we can actually charge for this and start to fund our marketing early on. Do you know what I mean? Like you start to think about things completely different because you're like, you're solving a problem. You're not solving a solution, which is marketing.
And I think I've been really all in on that idea too of like marketing, especially like content marketing is in and of itself a product. And so you have to think about product market fit of your content. You have to think about competitors, and you can also think about monetization, right? Like there's a reason why conferences make a lot of money, even like user conferences and like profitable companies that run conferences. You know what I mean? So if you're putting on a conference, who's to say that you can't make revenue from that for the business, you know?
Or like your ebooks that you're like squabbling over, like, do we gate it or not? This is a moral question. I'm like, what have you charged for it?
Yeah, throw $30 on there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are brands that have done that, right? They've done books or something. It's like if you take the marketing out of it, all of a sudden you have so many more options that you were completely blind to when you were looking through the lens of marketing, sales, customer journey, blah.
Yeah. How do we show up in the places that our customers exist, make them like us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then get them to do something. And those that get them to do something can also be make money for the company outside of any time that you purchase a product.
Well, that should be it, right? Like the end goal, if you're a company, has to be the maintenance, the longevity, and the growth of the company. And it's just a fact of the way companies work if you are going to secure any kind of funding. If you're going to take money then outside of a loan or something that you could pay back over time, like growth is part of the deal. And even once you hit the street, it's like now all of a sudden, if you don't grow, that impacts your money through the value of your stock, right? And so like we see that every earnings season or whatever. It's like recently, without getting too nerdy, growth is always part of the deal of a company. It's part of the organism. It's what keeps it alive. It's human in its most abstract sense. But to do that, you can do it in more than one way. And one of those ways is to embrace community and make your organism thrive and grow through that. Or you could just create a go-to-market motion and do that. That does work. But I think the point is not all of that works forever. And you're always going to need to be open to other things. So you need your eye on the ultimate ball, which is like, we want to stay alive and grow.
Well, and how I think about this too, I think the best way to stay alive and grow, bringing it back to like creativity and creative control, is if instead of thinking of like my company is the product and marketing is going to market the product, sales is going to sell the product, and blah, blah, blah. Instead, you think, my company is here to solve problems of this specific group, right?
Yep.
And the product then is definitely probably solves, hopefully, some really good problems. But if you can then think about community and content and all these other things as that's also the company, right? Because the company is trying to solve problems for this customer base.
I love
Then you
that.
can bring in, and then it makes it more sense to maybe, monetize some piece of traditionally what was content marketing or what was events and community stuff because our company exists to solve problems for this group. But I think that's going back to what episode it was when you were like, marketers should be CEOs instead of product people. I don't know if you said instead of, but like, you probably did. You probably said product people should not be CEOs. And
I'll stand by
marketers
that. I'll
should be
co-sign that.
the only CEOs. But I think if you think about the reason why a lot of founder CEOs probably don't embrace that larger image is because they're product focused and they're like, my product will solve the problem for these, not realizing that there are problems that exist for this customer base that your product will never be able to solve, right? Like I always think of business process change. Anytime that I'll sell my product into the business or into my customer base or whatever, there's also the challenge of how do you get human beings to adopt a new thing? And your product might be really easy to use, but like the change itself, like change management, that's something that your product probably won't be able to solve. You need content and community and maybe even like a team of people that go on site to help.
I think what you're saying is the product and the company, they're not the end point. And if leaders were leading from that mindset where they're technically, that's the whole point of having a mission and a vision. I just think that it's become an errand for most leaders and they don't really adhere to it. Those were my guiding light. Those are actually what kept me really focused at Animals, was like our vision, mission, and values were infused into everything I did. I wasn't just like trying to get the team to use those words. I was like, this is how I lead.
Yeah.
And to the point where I still apply some of those values and principles today because they helped us achieve the outcomes that we wanted. And so what you're saying is like, you're really challenging leaders to do what they're supposed to do in the first place, which is like have vision and be working towards that vision. It actually behooves you as a leader to be a cog in the greater wheel.
Yeah.
Because that's where all your opportunity is.
And then your team is going to naturally come up with creative, like if they have that umbrella instead of market the product umbrella, and instead they think of it's my mission to whatever, solve the problems of whatever customer base is, you are then going to have more creative solutions bubbling up from your team that then you're going to be able to be like, wow, I didn't need to know everything. I didn't need to set so much parameters and guidelines. I just needed to give them something to like aspire to work on.
Even you as a brand. Like I remember when I was building community at Help Scout, most of my strategy involved going to practitioners in the community and highlighting their solutions.
Yeah.
These were people at other brands. These were, we've even included help like support people from other competitors. I was like, guys, let's be friends. Like, let's do something together. I'm sure and that was the stickiness and the power and the impact of that on getting people to change behavior was so much stronger. Had I been able to play that out,
it would have worked.
It had all the right signals. Actually, can I tell you this? Because we have to go in 1 minute and I have a meeting, but I had this realization the other day that I don't think I can point to like a single marketing campaign that I've ever been able to say, I saw this through and here are the results. I've made companies lots of money and I can point to exactly how I've done that, especially like more so.
I know what you mean, to go like from ideation to launch to completion with enough time and data to say like I did that.
I literally have 0 marketing campaigns under my belt that I can point to. I like grew traffic at Animals one time and like I helped things go well at other companies, but like
It's fine.
I was never allowed to finish. Like the brilliant part was like about to come and they're like, you're fired.
Can't fire you now.
I know. I want there to be a national fired day where everybody celebrates being fired at one time to change the stigma around it.
Yeah.
Mostly because I really like what I do, which is take someone out to like a really fancy lunch and go shopping with them. And it works. So I was like, I'm going to make this a holiday. Like, let's celebrate being fired. It's not that bad.
I like
really
it. Do we have a February 29th this year? Maybe it could be like every 4 years on February 29th is National Fire Day because we fire that day on the other years.
Oh, I want it every year though.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out.
Like I would save up for that.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay, y'all. That's a wrap. Thank you as always for listening.
We'll be back next week. And just remember, you're doing great. You're doing great.
30% of you are doing great. The rest, you got to get your shit together. Come on.
You know which side you're on this week.
You know.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
A year and a half ago with my friend on the day she was fired. She was fired from her job. And
So
I
you
was
went
like,
shopping?
that's what I do. Yeah. I was like, come on, we're going into town. I bought her like a really fancy lunch and then we went shopping. And I was like, well, I have to buy stuff too. And so we both liked the same blazer. We got friendship blazers.
Friendship blazers.